All right, we are back with week 2 of Evan in the Closet. We did this last week, and we do have this for a little mini series this week. We're not doing a full show this week, but we are previewing both of the college football playoff games. I thought that was important to do, and so did Jordan. Jordan's here. How you doing, Jordan?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. It's not, you know what? It's not that uncomfortable right here. I was sitting like back. You see these like little circles? Like I
Yeah.
was leaning back on them. I'm like, oh my gosh, my back's killing me by the end of the episode. But if I just sit up, I'm fine. Um, but anyways, let's get right into it, Jordan.
First, we got Alabama, Michigan in the Rose Bowl. This is a game of similar attributes, right? Both Alabama and Michigan are known for their shutdown defenses. As a matter of fact, Alabama allowed 18.4 points a game this year. Now, you say that's great, right? Until you look at Michigan, who's allowed 9.5 points a game. Now, make what you want of Michigan's schedule, only playing, Ohio State and Penn State as their two major games, and then playing Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. Matter of fact is when you play a college football game, it's hard enough to shut anybody out. And then Alabama, you look at how they got here to begin with. A loss to Texas early in the season. The next week you had the struggle against South Florida, right? The 17-3 game where everyone was like, "What's going on with Bama? There's no way they go, 11-1 like they did." Um, they had close calls all throughout the season. USF, yes, they won that game by 14, but it's South Florida. Alabama should have won that game by 50. And then you got Arkansas, where they only won by 3. You've got Tennessee, where they had to come back in the second half to beat them. Auburn, we all remember what happened there, right? With the miracle 4th and 31. And then, of course, knocking off the back-to-back national champions, Georgia Bulldogs, ending their 29-game win streak. So Alabama has certainly had a tough road to get here. Evan, what do you make of the Crimson Tide this year?
So I mean, very weird year, right? Very not Nick Saban year, and we haven't had a Nick Saban year in a while. So you're talking about barely beating USF. Should have lost to Auburn, who is very able. And yes, I understand playing at Auburn is always a tough environment, but come on, that team, they didn't have a quarterback, and you almost lost them. So they're still very well coached. I'm not doubting that. Nick Saban still has a good reps on things. Defense improved throughout the year. Like Jordan said with Texas, they just looked like a lost cause. But the defense was kept keeping them in games. Jalen Milroe, especially in the championship game versus Georgia, finally stepped up. I'm like, when are we going to see Jalen Milroe do something spectacular? Usually he would play a first half of football and then he would kind of disappear, win or lose, in every Alabama game so far this year. But in the championship game, he stepped up. So I think they're on the right path. I will get to if they can challenge Michigan in a little bit. But I think Alabama, you see a team that started slow, but it's a very well coached team. And when you're well coached and you're a good team, sometimes you can become a great team.
All right, now let's talk about Michigan for a little bit because they've had a little more tumultuous, however you say that word, path to get here. Obviously, like I said, you make what you want of the schedule. Them only playing Penn State, Ohio State as their two big games. Obviously, they won both of them. Let's talk about the cheating scandal a little bit. It was brought up around mid-season, I guess, that Michigan had been caught cheating in 21 and 22, leading to Jim Harbaugh being suspended for the final 3 games of the regular season against Penn State, Maryland, and Ohio State. Now, Penn State and Ohio State, obviously their two biggest games. Not having your head coach would almost spell almost spell doom, right? Not for Michigan. They won at Penn State and then they beat Ohio State for a third straight year, advancing to the Big Ten championship game where they shut out Iowa in a 26 nothing game. Evan, what do you think of the Wolverines?
All right, so I am drinking the Kool-Aid this year on Michigan. I think they are a very good team. And, there's some teams we've talked about that they get really good. They may even go undefeated. And then what is going to happen when they get in a playoff or a huge bowl game? They're not going to win. You saw this with Michigan last year with TCU, unfortunately. But this year, it just looks different. I mean, Jordan said it, 9.5 points on defense. Yes, some of those are inferior teams, but that's still a Big Ten schedule. And you still face Ohio State. You still face Penn State. You still face good teams. And to hold them like that can't be understated. And also the offense is clicking. Yes, I know JJ McCarthy. You can say what you want about him, but he's gotten the job done. You got Blake Corum. You've got just a great offense all around. So there's really outside of unless if you need like deep throws, which Michigan hasn't, there's really not a weakness on this team. And that's something if Alabama forces JJ McCarthy to throw, then maybe it gets interesting. But otherwise, not a lot of glaring weaknesses. They just crushed in the Big Ten this year.
All right, now let's move on to key players. When Alabama has the football, Evan, who are you looking at?
So who am I looking at is not one with Alabama. It's interesting because their offensive line, especially we talked about on this podcast earlier this year, they needed to be up to the challenge when Alabama was still rotating the quarterbacks. They're not doing that anymore. They got Jalen Milroe. But I'm still looking at the offensive line of Alabama because listen, I think Alabama had a very good script against Georgia. I think they're ready to go. They know how to play Georgia. Georgia's in the SEC. They're not too familiar with Michigan. Michigan's defense is going to throw a lot at them. I think it all starts up front for Alabama. If Jalen Milroe's got to have a hope of doing anything, that offensive line's got to be ready to go.
All right, so when Alabama has the ball, I am looking at Jalen Milroe, right? We saw him struggle earlier in the year. He's turned it on of late. SEC championship game against Georgia, he made play after play after play. There was one that I remember where he was literally shut down and then just flipped it out to I can't remember who. I believe it was Isaiah Bond. I apologize if I forget
Sounds
that.
right.
But Yeah, so I'm looking at Jalen Milroe when Alabama has the ball, and then when Crimson Tide do have the ball, I would imagine Michigan would put a spy on Jalen Milroe, right? We've seen time and time again where he'll escape the pocket, pick up 10 yards on a run. There were a couple games this year where he scored multiple touchdowns on his feet. So I would imagine Michigan would put a spy on him, and my guess would be linebacker Junior Colson.
Yeah, not only that with Jalen Milroe, he's a big dude too. So not only do you have to have a spy on him, you got to have someone who's going to be able to tackle him if he actually gets to him. So linebacker would probably be a good move there. Yeah.
And then when Michigan has the ball, Evan, who are you looking at?
Blake Corum, can they just do what they've done all year? Just keep it on the ground, just punch it in versus Alabama. I think that's possible. I don't think that's for sure, based on how good Alabama's defense is and based on how much Nick Saban's going to have them ready to go. But that's what I'm going to see. Can Blake Corum take Alabama's hopes out early and often?
All right, so when Michigan has the ball, I am actually looking at their tight end, Colton Loveland. I respect what Evan said about Blake Corum, right? The Michigan run game has gotten going all year, but my thing is Alabama's really good against the run. I saw that personally as a Georgia fan in the SEC championship game. To me, Michigan has to make plays through the air to win this game. Alabama, like I said, Alabama's defense is very good against the run. There were multiple 3rd and 1s where they stopped Georgia. And then on defense for Alabama, all freshman SEC player Caleb Downs. This guy was highly recruited out of Mill Creek High School, I believe it was. All SEC freshman honors, and he'll be tasked with shutting down that Michigan passing game. And then let's go to keys to the game. Evan, what you got?
Keys to the game. So keys for each team. Alabama, that I think I've already laid out Alabama. Their offensive line has to come to play. Michigan's defense is going to swarm. Passing is going to be tough. Even if Jalen Miller plays okay, passing is going to be tough. They got to get the run game going, and they just got to give Jalen Miller some times. Keys to the game for Michigan, I would say work some play action in. I would say you don't have to go deep. You don't have to hit the Hail Mary. But you got to keep a balanced attack. Alabama's going to throw some things at you too. I think Blake Corum might be enough. And running the ball might be enough to even get you the win. That's how good you are this year. But just work some short play action in, and if not, maybe some intermediate play action. But I think you got to keep Alabama on their feet.
I think for Alabama, they've got to protect Milroe, right? Like Evan said. This Michigan pass rush hasn't been great this year, but they can still get after the quarterback. And then, of course, Alabama wide receivers have to create separation. We've seen how good this Michigan secondary is, hence them only giving up 9.5 points per game. For Michigan, I feel like you got to get the run game going early, make Alabama's DBs creep down into the box, respect you, and maybe throw some play action their way. And then obviously Michigan's got to get pressure on Milroe. You cannot let him sit back there. Find Jermaine Burton, Isaiah Bond, um, and and make plays. Now he's going to make plays with his legs a time or two, but can you limit those? Um, Evan, what is the big storyline for each team in your opinion?
So the big storyline, I think, is if Saban goes down. So say Alabama's losing by 2 touchdowns early on, right? Does Saban panic or does he stick with his game plan? Now I don't know what his game plan is going to be with Jalen Milroe. It's sometimes like Jordan said, they were a lot run heavy against Georgia, and then other games they passed early on and then kind of played conservative through the rest of the game. Whatever the game plan is, do they stick to it if they get down to Michigan? Because I do think Michigan is a different animal than some of the teams they've faced this year. And as for Michigan, the big storyline, I just want to know what does Harbaugh get crafty a little bit too? Like obviously, he was gone. And I think they should still run their game plan versus Alabama, but I'm not Harbaugh. Does he change up like what he wants to do? We'll have to see with that.
All right, for me, for Alabama, it's Nick Saban being back again, looking for a seventh national championship at Alabama. Unbelievable, right? This guy is the greatest of all time. I don't think there's a debate, especially if he goes and wins another national championship in a quote unquote down year.
Yep.
And then for Michigan, like I mentioned earlier, the cheating scandal midway through the season, everybody was down on them, giving them the I'm going to throw baseball here for a second, the Houston Astros treatment.
Yeah.
Um, hoping for Michigan to lose. Do
Well, for
they?
the Houston Astros, that's worked. They've won a World Series since then and been
It
competitive.
ha-
So.
it has. But for Michigan, can they redeem themselves? Can they win a first? Can they win their first playoff game? They're actually 0 for 2. They lost to Georgia in 2021, and then they lost to TCU last season. So can they win their first playoff game? All
Yeah.
right. Prediction time. Evan, who wins this game and why?
So, I think Michigan wins this game, but I can see either team winning this game. But I do think Michigan wins this game due to the fact that what Jordan just said, they're going to be hyped up to win this game. And I do think I was going back and forth. I thought originally if Alabama could beat Georgia, they can beat anyone. Now, I do sort of think that. I think Georgia was a very good football team. I'm still surprised they got left out, but I kind of understand it. So I do think beating Georgia is a huge deal. But I do think also Michigan is a different breed this year. Because I really, outside of maybe you could say JJ McCarthy doesn't throw enough, and we'll see if he messes up with the deep ball or whatever. I really don't see any weakness on that team. O-line's good. Defense holds them to 9.5 points a game. Running attack is good. McCarthy's good enough. I see them set up for success. I think Michigan is going to win this game by about 10, 14. Give me a low scoring affair, I think. I'm going to take Michigan 24-10 over Alabama.
All right. So for me, I'm going to disagree with Evan. I think Alabama keeps the ball rolling to the national championship game. Um, since their early loss to Texas in week 2, Alabama has won 11 games in a row. I don't think that stops here. I think the Crimson Tide win this game. You give Nick Saban extra time to prepare, the greatest coach of all time. He studied Michigan throughout these 3 weeks or however long it's been. I just think Alabama wins this game. They make one more play on defense than Michigan does. Give me the Crimson Tide to win this game in a lower scoring game, like Evan said, but a great game, 24-20.